and Doug Bailey from Rasky Partners. And I'll let them kind of segue into some more information about their backgrounds and the firm in general. But I'll get things started off by letting you all know that Happy Plants and Q&As such as this are now becoming monthly events that will be live streamed as well as recorded and available to view later. Also, reminder that on February 18th, there is going to be another event that we're excited to have. And it's going to be the Symposium Series #1, as well as a big reminder about the annual Cannabis Certification Council, Cannabis Sustainability Symposium. That information is available on the cannabiscertificationcouncil.org website, where you can sign up. Early bird pricing will be launching in March. And that event brings together network professionals and industry leaders in cannabis to network, learning opportunities, great speakers, and some awesome discussion. So, all right, we'll get things started. Jeff Terrey is a principal at Rasky Partners in the public affairs practice, and Doug Bailey is a senior vice president in the public relations practice. So let's get things started. Jeff, do you want to give a little bit of background about Rasky Partners and yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Eliza, and good to see you, and good to see you, Doug, and thanks to everyone at the Cannabis Certification Council, and thank you to everyone who's logged in this morning or this afternoon. So as Eliza said, I'm a principal at Rasky Partners. For most of you guys who don't know, we're New England's largest and most established independent public affairs firm. We have probably about 30 people. We've been around in business also about 30 years. We're based in Boston, also have an office in Washington, D.C. We have strong established connections. Well, first, we're a Democratic firm. We have strong established connections with folks in the Biden administration. We actually have two Rasky Partners alumni who are now working in the Biden administration, which is great. We have very strong relationships with the current mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh, who is the designee to be Secretary of Labor for President Biden. I've known Mayor Walsh for more than 20 years, served on his transition team. And then obviously the members of the Massachusetts congressional delegation, Catherine Clark, the assistant speaker, the chairman of the Rules Committee, Congressman McGovern, chairman of House Ways and Means Committee, Richie Neal, and then also, people on the state level in and throughout New England. We've been in business more than 30 years. We've represented people run the gambit from individuals to multinational companies to sovereign nations, trade associations, and cannabis. We've been involved in the cannabis industry for, I think we started off in 2012. We were part of the original team that helped put together the ballot question that led to the legalization of medical cannabis. And we've been working with folks largely since then. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I'll turn things over to Doug. Doug, if you want to introduce yourself, a little bit about yourself and your background, and some of the work that you do and we do in cannabis.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff and Eliza. I come to this business from a journalism background. I was a reporter and editor at the Boston Globe for about 15 years, and then joined Rasky Partners. Predominantly, I seem to drift toward crisis work, which really isn't public relations in as much as it's strategic communications, and with corporations and individuals, some of whom have been thrust into the media spotlight unwillingly and need to navigate their way out, or at least navigate their way inside it. But obviously we're not totally crisis oriented. We have traditional public relations and media management and social media management and things like that, the traditional avenues of public relations. I think in the cannabis spectrum, we'll talk about how this is a relatively new area for everyone, legal cannabis, and the need for both government affairs and public affairs or public relations because it's a kind of an exciting, burgeoning industry that is in need of our services, I think. So we'll talk more about that.
Yeah,
Thank-
and when you look at the services that we have experience with and that we've seen the industry in need of, from a public affairs side, really where we do best is kind of that intersection between business, politics, and the media. And cannabis is a perfect example of that. So, whether or not it's helping folks obtain licenses and obtain community support and community approval. We've helped folks from 253 Organics to Meramed, Jolican, others in Massachusetts through that process. And then, much larger companies dealing with whatever crisis or PR needs. And actually, thanks to Doug's good work, Forbes magazine named us one of the America's best PR firms for 2021, which is great, and an awful lot of Doug's sweat and work with his clients. So,
Well, you're too kind, but thanks.
Doug, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how you see kind of the media covering cannabis, how that's changed at all over the last couple of years, and just a little bit of your experience with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really been interesting and exciting. This is such a new industry, and it started out as it kind of had an air of gold rush to it, when not everyone's going to come back from the mine with a full bag of gold. But the media got really geared up and ramped up to deal with it all in a hurry. The Globe, for example, they had at one time, I think, 5 cannabis reporters on staff. I think they've narrowed it down to 3, which kind of shows an arc, of how it was crazy in the beginning, and maybe it's leveled off. But I think the need for the industry right now is to convert, or at least transform, into a more sophisticated industry. I think there's an air that this is still a bunch of hippies trying to sell weed, and it's not at all. We worked with what is, by some measurement, the largest cannabis company in the world, Curaleaf, and they got into a little scrape with the regulators here for violating a regulation that really hadn't been promulgated. I mean, they were accused of changing ownership against regulations, but actually there was no regulation against that. But nevertheless, the regulating body kind of went after them for that. So there were 2 avenues from that. One from the government affairs side, was trying to deal with the regulators clamping down, and then on the public affairs side, or rather the PR side, having to explain that and communicate that to reporters, because once these reporters are assigned to cover the cannabis industry, they're looking for tension, they're looking for controversy. That's not a knock on the media, but I mean, it's tension and controversy that make good stories. And so the challenge for these companies are to, if they're in the middle of that, if they become the focal point of that tension, which they don't want to do, but if they are, they need to be able to communicate exactly what's going on and how they got there and how they're going to get out, and their mission and goals and purpose. And so the need to communicate strategically is really that's why I always think public relations is a little bit of a misnomer, because it implies, like there were publicity hounds, and we're not by any means. We're strategic communicators. And we try to figure out the best way to communicate a message. And there's so many avenues to use now, and there's so many tools in our box now, when it used to be just, you had to get a story in the paper. It's not that way anymore, of course. We worked with MedMen, which is another big company, and MedMen wanted to get involved in sort of helping right some of the wrongs of the country's war on drugs, and lobby the state for, to forgive some of the penalties and punishments that had been unfairly administered during the war on drugs. These are predominantly minority individuals who've been thrown in jail for having an ounce of marijuana on them. Now it's legal and they're still sitting in jail, or they still have it on their record. So they wanted to work expunging those records for those people. And so we got involved in a campaign with them to do that, which I think was pretty successful.
Doug, we have a question from the audience.
Is it about my glasses or how I look or anything?
It is not.
Oh.
The question is, would it be wise for national news business outlets such as CNBC or Bloomberg to do a cannabis report?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you think about the development, there aren't many companies that are industries that are starting from scratch the way this one is. I mean, they were illegal for so long, and now the tables have turned. And I mean, name another industry that just came out of the woodwork from nowhere. I mean, I think you'd have to go back to maybe the high tech revolution or the internet revolution, where apps and internet companies were just sprouting like wildfire. Now you have this whole new industry. So yeah, I mean, if you look at Motley Fool, I saw a report the other day from Motley Fool just announcing, or at least trying to say that the great investment opportunity that exists in cannabis, and trying to get people interested to. A lot of these companies are going public or seeking investors, private investors, and so there's huge. So CNBC, Bloomberg, yeah, I think they should be covering this. There's a gigantic opportunity for investors in this field.
Thanks,
And
Doug.
that's another thing we can bring to the table is investor relations too. We don't do a lot of traditional investor relations, but it is an offshoot of public affairs and public relations and government affairs. So we can certainly do that.
So Jeff, do you think you could kind of touch on some of the day-to-day general work that you do at Rasky Partners for a typical group in Massachusetts or another state, and how you keep track of general legislation and what other types of support you can provide with jurisdictions?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Good question. On a day-to-day level, the work that we do with folks who are trying to open up something in Massachusetts, it can really run the full gamut, and has run the full gamut from one, helping people actually identify what communities that they should look at, and then beginning to have conversations with those communities of whether or not the community has any interest of supporting a facility, helping them establish those relationships if that community is potentially open, helping to raise a profile at the appropriate time with Doug's help through the media or social media, whatever are the appropriate channels. Helping to connect folks to attorneys or other people who've been involved in the industry and in Massachusetts, and then ultimately helping people navigate the regulators. And we've got very strong relationships with a bunch of people throughout Massachusetts state politics, and on the municipal level. I think we're frankly seen as honest brokers. The people that we're taking to sit down with people are, generally the right people. And, we've been there before, we've done it before, and we help them navigate through the entire process and make sure that they know where the pitfalls are, what do they have to avoid, and how to make it so that their applications are dealt with, hopefully on a speedy basis, as speedy as state government can work.
So you and Doug both provided some great insight into the various synergies between media relations and government relations when it comes to the cannabis industry. I was wondering if you could just kind of touch upon the overall state of government relations within the industry.
I'll start on the state level. So obviously we're based in Massachusetts. We do work on the state level. Massachusetts is our bread and butter, but we do have reach throughout New England, and we have represented clients throughout New England. We have the ability to track legislation and regulations in all 50 states, and we do for a number of clients. We also track whatever elected and appointed officials are saying on a social media basis around whatever issue it is that we're tracking for folks, which is, I think, incredibly helpful to try to see where the next markets could be, but also where the opportunities are and where the discussion is leading. In terms of kind of the state of government relations, obviously COVID has had a significant impact on everything in the economy. Lobbying is really no different. Social media obviously played or has played a tremendous role in political campaigns over the last several cycles, never more so than now. Every legislator is usually a outgoing, somewhat gregarious person, enjoys interacting with the general public. Vast majority of them have been sitting at home, and they need an outlet to interact, and a lot of times that outlet is now social media. And so we're seeing government relations, and what we're doing is we're embracing social media an awful lot more from a lobbying standpoint in terms of building relationships, as well as trying to educate folks and help to push things. So that's one piece. Another piece is, back in 2012, there were not a lot of legislators who wanted anything to do with anyone in the cannabis industry. Well, that's changed. And there's a huge number of, or significantly more comfort now amongst elected officials interacting with folks in the cannabis industry. And that's, I think that's only going to accelerate. And that's a significant difference over the last 4 years.
Great.
I think the next big issue, and it's not new, is to try to federalize the legalization. And it's unfair for a lot of these companies can't get financing from American banks because the banks are skittish about getting involved with a product that the federal government still recognizes as illegal. So they're going to foreign investment. Excuse, my dog is barking here. They're going to foreign investors, and we, do we really want that? I mean, there's nothing wrong with foreign investors, but so I think there'll be a big issue, a big point to be made about whether or not to federalize laws.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that obviously with the Democrats taking over the Senate, that does open up some possibilities. However, with the filibuster still around, are there going to be 60 votes to allow a vote on legalization? Probably not. Would there be 60 votes to allow changes in banking? Maybe. And I think there's a decent possibility of that. So I think you're going to start to see some movement. I think the Democrats, right? I mean, some already has passed in the House. I think you're going to see Democrats try to push the envelope, potentially include legalization as part of a larger criminal justice reform bill, see if they can pick up some votes in the Senate on that. But I think the jury is still out on whether or not you're going to see full legalization, at least in Massachusetts. I'm sorry, on the federal level.
And we had a question from the audience about Massachusetts specifically. The question is, what marketing options are currently legal or illegal for cannabis businesses in Massachusetts, and will it open up more in 2021? Good question. So, you are seeing, again, as the industry has changed, and I think the industry, you have more established players, elected officials feel different about the industry. And I think that you are seeing
states, just Massachusetts, for example, things that were completely off the table, such as delivery, maybe 3 years ago, well, delivery is going to happen in Massachusetts, right? So things are changing. Marketing in Massachusetts really focuses around making sure that you're not marketing to kids, that there's no medical symbols, things like that in your logo. But it's really focused around making sure that, you don't have the Joe Camel, type of logos that may be attractive to kids, those types of issues.
There are also barriers to marketing that may come down. We tried to place an op-ed for one of our cannabis clients to play, and they wouldn't take it. The publications wouldn't take it, under the belief that that was advertising an illegal product, and they won't take ads. So there are barriers to marketing this product still.
And we have another follow-up question about potential for banks. So if a banking trade association and credit unions pushing for federal banking rules changes, do you see that happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's going to be a significant move on that. I think, again, with the Democrats taking over control of the Senate, Senator Schumer has been, the new Senate Majority Leader, has been an advocate around the issue. I think that people see an opportunity, and I think they're absolutely going to push.
And I guess we've touched on this a little bit, the differences between state level and federal level, but could you expand on some of the challenges that are associated with both media relations and government relations when it comes to a substance that's not federally regulated and it varies so much state by state?
Starting off on the government relations side, the fact that it's not federally allowed and not federally regulated makes it really tough for potential dispensaries to go across state lines. Obviously there's a patchwork of rules and regulations in each state. Each state is reviewing potential entrants differently in terms of what their priorities are, the process. Some of our clients, the process from when it's a lengthy process, a lengthy and expensive process. It's, millions of dollars, and it's, it can potentially be a long time in terms of once you say, okay, I want to be in this market, I need to find a location, I need to build a relationship with that community, I need to get approval from that community, I need to, design what the place is going to look like, I need to work with the CCC, the Cannabis Control Commission in Massachusetts, I need to get a provisional license, I need to do a build out, right, and then a final license, and in each locality has their own process, and so it's obviously it's a full-time job for folks to understand what that process is. And Doug, I don't know what you think on the media side.
Well, that's right. I mean, Jim McGovern, one of our representatives, has filed legislation to open up the banks for the companies, cannabis companies. And I'm not sure how that works. It's not federal legalization, but would allow cannabis companies to have access to local financial companies. So that opens up a whole other stream for the companies. It might lead to more companies being, better financed and better organized. And so again, it's just another broadening of the horizon for these firms, and they're going to need a lot of support in government affairs and public relations and so forth.
And when it comes to publicity in the industry, what is your take on both patients and consumers being worthy of publicity?
Patients and consumers? You mean the companies being publicized? I mean, I think the industry needs to demonstrate who they are, who's behind this. because it still has a little bit of a cowboy gold rush feel to it all, and it's not. I mean, there are sophisticated people and sophisticated investors involved in this, and I think raising the level of sophistication and raising that image of the companies of the industry is really important. On the consumer side, I'm not sure exactly what you meant by that for
Like,
consumers.
So general cannabis consumers, not necessarily using for medicinal purposes.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you know, it's a legal product like alcohol now, and I think Jeff touched on it when he said about advertising to kids or marketing to kids is a big deal, and I think there's a great opportunity for these companies to demonstrate the correct way or the right way to market themselves without getting into trouble. You know, looking like Joe Camel.
Exactly.
It's a hard, it's a hard process though, when, again, because it's so hard to open up dispensaries in multiple states. It's a hard
That's right.
process to establish a brand, right? So if you're going to try to raise the profile of your product, and you're in Massachusetts, and then also maybe you want to be in New Jersey, it's really hard.
Right. And you can't, you have to grow your product in state. You can't, even if you have dispensaries, say in New Jersey and Massachusetts, you can't grow your product in Massachusetts and then sell it in New Jersey. The laws don't allow that, which is another barrier, really, because when you think about these large, cannabis farms in California, but they can't sell out of state. They have to establish a farm somewhere else. It actually, some of the studies have shown that legalizing cannabis was supposed to wipe out the black market, but with some of these barriers in place that affects the price of the product, the black market is probably doing fine. And there's other things I think the industry has to institute if they really want to undermine the black market.
So one more question before we start to wrap things up. I was wondering what your take would be on how the industry in general could become more endearing to non-users of cannabis, just kind of from a public image standpoint.
Right, and I think we kind of touched on it, but yeah, I mean, I think they have to be open and transparent. They have to demonstrate that they can be good neighbors in their communities. They can't, in most places, they can't grow the product outside. They have to. So there's a lot of things. I know the council is working on with sustainability of the products, growing the product environmentally, sustainable and good, and but also energy. It takes a massive amount of energy to grow cannabis. I've seen some figures that that would just blow your mind how much energy it takes. So they have to do it inside, and so there's a lot that the industry can do to demonstrate energy efficiency, energy compliance, energy progressive energy tactics and technology, and be willing to talk about it all. I think there's some companies that just would rather not talk about it and just go about their business and hope everything works out. But I think in the long run, it will be better to be more transparent on what you do, so everyone knows who you are and what you're doing.
I also think I think that's a good point, Doug, but I also think involved with your local community, right? You mentioned
That's right.
in terms of being good neighbors, right? Be a good neighbor and embrace the community, and don't try to have a decent profile in that community. Try to grow that profile, grow relationships, right? You are a legal organization, you're a legal entity. You are allowed to do this wherever it is you're doing it. And then, one benefit of, different states have different rules. But, one benefit of each company having to go through their own process, getting their own local approval, and then essentially being in charge of growing their own brand, is there's an incentive and an opportunity for each company to be as local as possible, right? So be seen as a good partner.
And remember, anything the government can grant, they can take away. So all it's going to take is some massive scandal in this business, and there'll be a movement to make it illegal again or put them out of business. So, so that's another reason to walk on the right side.
Well, thank you both for your time and your expertise weighing in on this. And we hope you enjoyed this event, this Q&A. As a reminder, events like this and Symposium series, Happy Plants, will be monthly events. The calendar is available online on the Cannabis Certification Council's website. And another reminder that the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium will be happening May 20th through 21st, all virtual, so you can join from anywhere. And thank you everyone for joining.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.